Hello there and welcome to Community Life. Here we talk with community experts about their life journeys and learn from each other. Today we have a conversation with Samantha Venia Logan, a veteran community architect and consultant who teaches the social science of online community so people can build better virtual worlds. Also a speed demon, an avid biker who aspires to be a Kiwi. So, hello Venia.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, I'm great. Finally, it's been forever since we were like, as Taylor calls it, friend flirting in this community world. But now, yeah, now we have this conversation finally. And you know what? It's always hard for me when I see like two names, when people have
Oh,
two
yeah.
names. I don't know what to choose. So tell me the story of Samantha Venia and what do you prefer?
Absolutely. I am, so my mother and my father kind of got into several tips about what my name was going to be. So my father is Irish American and my mother is fourth generation Estonian. And on one hand, like my father is like, nope, Irish names. That's how it's going to work. Right. And I'm like, okay, sounds good. I'm down by that. But my mom wanted at least some form of control over my name and never really got it. But I am a transgender woman. And when I came out, there had to be a name change in some form. And things did not go well on my father's side. I did lose my father through my transition. And my mom is just like, well, you need a new name. And I wasn't allowed to name you. So let's do that. So she got her chance, she got her opportunity. All of us kids have a middle name that she gets to choose. And then we have a more normal first name for what normal is worth, right? So my younger sibling and I go by our middle names. So my name is Venia and my little brother's name is Atrix. And their origin Latin names. So venia is the Latin of the verb form for to forgive. And I had built an entire career around my entire name, Samantha Venia Logan, and it's all over the place, right? But I discovered after a small amount of time that I had detached myself from what my name actually meant. I'm Samantha, the marketer, the community manager. And I'm like, it doesn't feel like it's me anymore. So I started going by my middle name, which gives me a connection to my family. And a lot of people, I feel for some of the Spanish speaking and Southern dialects here in the United States because the IA always represents a y sound. But the traditional explanation for it is a long I. So it's Venia.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And what changed in your life after you changed your name, let's say?
Yeah, that's a great question. Choosing to go by my middle name was very much it was a sense of taking my personal identity back.
Mhm.
And there's a lot here, right? So I'll try to explain this as succinctly as I can. As a transgender woman, when I had first come out, I had a very intense sense of identity. And that sense of identity made me a little bit defensive. And this happens a lot. I lovingly call it the bitch phase, which is this notion of when you come out and you're like, yes, I've discovered who I am, you start to defend that role, even in positions where defending it is unnecessary. So other people might have like these microaggressions or these slights on your identity, and you overreact to them. As well, you should, right? Like you're still learning how to navigate the world. Well, when that started to happen, I built an entire YouTube channel and I launched a community YouTube channel called Trans Youth Channel back in 2012. And it has carried forward my transgender identity for a full decade now, right? I am a trans woman seeking to be a successful woman in marketing and tech and community now, right? So there's always been this sense that my identity is always front and center and it's always on the stage. And when I chose to go by my middle name, it was a moment of me saying, my identity doesn't need to be center stage for me to be center stage, for me to own that sense of authority and that sense of power. So when I switched to my middle name, it was me taking back that identity and saying, look, this is a me thing. This has nothing to do with everyone else. It's a me thing.
And tell me a story about your gender transition.
Oh, yeah. So if anyone is curious and you would like to see little 19-year-old Venia, I actually have an entire YouTube channel called Name is Sammy. And that's a part of that thing, right? Like I literally named my YouTube channel after my first name, Samantha. And that's kind of that moment I started to detach from that name. I think one of the most difficult to tell but interesting stories is how that YouTube channel actually came about. When I had come out, I was in a very conservative place, Cheyenne, Wyoming. And Cheyenne is a very right-wing Republican, not very LGBTQ friendly place at all. And I had been living with my father at the time, and I knew he was going to kick me out. I knew I was going to end up homeless the second I came out. So I was in college for a few months before I was able to secure the funds necessary for me to feel comfortable getting kicked out.
Yeah.
And I came out in school first before I told anyone else, basically saying, this is who I am among strangers before I lost like close family members. When I came out in school, people initially thought it was a joke or a statement. I was in an art degree path at the time. So they're like, oh, just the artsy person being artsy, I guess. No, wasn't the case, because about a month and a half goes in and people are like, this is still happening. She's still like cross-dressing in the hallways was what they thought it was. And then I started entering female restrooms. And we have this thing in the queer community called potty panic. We know it's going to happen. We do our best to avoid it. It's tremendously uncomfortable. But it's just one of the mainstay aspects of transition. Like, if I, as a female expressed person, go into a bathroom and a woman clocks me, quote unquote, and recognizes that I am male from birth, right? Oftentimes they'll just be like, you're not allowed access to this female restroom just purely because of the clothes that you're wearing. And it's like, well, that's wrong, because socially I'm transitioned. I can't speed up a medical transition within the space of a few months. So like, you're going to have to deal with this middle ground area. So anyway, I'm getting off track. I go into this restroom and this woman gets really aggressive. And she's just like, you can't be here. Nothing happened. I'm just crying. I don't even have the ability to respond. People who know me might be shocked by this, but I genuinely was speechless. It was very, very difficult for me. And that same woman, after seeing me cry and in tears, we shared a math class, and I could not focus at all during that period. She went to the school's HR. And I was dragged into the office for the university. Remember, this is Cheyenne, Wyoming. And the HR office was like, listen, we've never handled this before. We've never had a transgender person on campus. And I'm like, well, that's not true. But they stated, we understand your rights. You are female identified and you're going into this bathroom. If you want those rights, though, there's a difference between us reinforcing those rights on policy and the school understanding your rights. So if you want your rights, you have to advocate for yourself for them. And I'm like, no, my rights are my rights. It's up to you to defend me in this situation. But they didn't agree. They just straight up said, in order for us to advocate, we have set up a stage for you. And we expect you they expected me to go onto that stage and proclaim to the university that I am trans and these are my rights.
Mm.
How horrifying it is that as a minority, their expectation for me getting my rights was for me to at all times be an advocate for it. And they didn't just give me a stage. They didn't just ask me if this was something I wanted to do. They forced me to attend an event where I was talking about being trans to the whole university. They spotlighted me. And I'm like, this is a dangerous place. People die for coming out in Wyoming. And that's not even a joke. Like Matthew Shepard occurred in Laramie, Wyoming. And we have a whole bunch of others too. And I'm terrified, but I also, that was kind of the moment where my bitch phase kind of kicked in. And I'm just like, well, if you're going to make me advocate, in for a penny, in for a pound, right? So I'm like, okay, fine. You're going to give me this stage and I'm going to be a part of this LGBTQ club called Across All Lines. I'm going to do more with this stage than you ever would have thought I possibly could. So I went and I grabbed a camera, popped it down on the stage, and I recorded my first ever live talk about my transition and threw it up online. And it was that moment when my YouTube channel started, out of pure spite and belligerence and overreaction and a complete and total bitch phase. And about 6 months afterwards, I was so glad I did it. I was so glad I went to the internet for that, because I had this incredible community of other transgender people who were closeted, not out yet, still trying to figure out their lives. And there were 4,400 other people who were looking at me and going, I cannot believe you did that. And I'm so happy. Can you help me? And I'm like, well, this just started my career.
Yeah, it's a really great and inspiring story. And I can't even imagine the level of pressure you dealt with.
Mm.
And before starting this YouTube channel, did you meet this pressure on your own, or you had somebody to talk to?
Before the YouTube channel, I had people to talk to, but I wouldn't say I was close with them or anything, because I didn't actually tell anyone that I was transgender. I knew when I was 11, and it tore me up inside. And we don't have to go into like the super dark deeps. There are some warnings we would have to put there, especially for self-harm and suicidality. Get help, by the way. Be sure, like, there's more out there for you. But before graduating high school, I had never actually told anyone. I actually told my first girlfriend first, which was an interesting move. I think she also knew, like, we broke up because there was a certain closeness that I couldn't give her. And she was the first to know in high school. I did find solace, and I did learn about being transgender through online communities. The less savory sorts. Like, I spent some time on 4chan, on 8chan, 99chan, actually had a cross-dressing forum. And I remember this one specific moment where, we're gonna get pretty personal here. I was in 10th grade, I would say. And I was cross-dressing in my own basement. And for the longest time, I thought it was a sexual thing. And I felt so deviant and so guilty and so unhappy that I would spend any modicum of time, any amount of time I possibly could alone in the home, cross-dressing.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of reached a point one day where I'm taking some pictures, some selfies, and I'm like, wait, this is super tame. Like, there's nothing sexual about this going on right now. Like, I just went and did laundry. I'm just doing all of my chores, I'm playing with my dog, I'm watching TV. I'm just cross-dressed at the time. Why do I think that this is sexual? Why do I find this guilty in any way? And I received a call from a friend, and he's just like, hey, do you want to go to the movies? And I'm like, no, kind of sorry, I'm a bit busy. He's my best friend. I love hanging out with the man. And I hung up and I'm like, I just chose to stay at home inside cross-dressing instead of going and hanging out with a friend. And I have no desire to do anything sexual with this moment. What is going on? So I went to 99 Chan and I'm like, does anyone else feel this way when cross-dressing? Like, you just want to live your life this way?
Yeah.
And I get a comment from another anonymous person, not even 7 minutes later, who's just like, I've seen you on this forum so frequently and so often, and I've got to say, your pictures have a completely different air than anyone else. Are you sure you're not just straight up trans? And I looked at him and I'm like, what is this word? I've never seen this word before. I've been here for months. What does this thing mean? I Googled it, and immediately my head went from, no, you're not this. No, you're not this. No, you don't have this identity. No, you don't like judo. No, you don't like football. No, you don't like cars or being masculine. You have no desire in the gym. All of these no's. And I never got a yes as to who I actually was. But a single Google of the word transgender, and it immediately clicked, and I knew what I was. And it only took about 10 minutes after that for me to really get hit with what that actually meant, because I knew that this wasn't accepted. It wasn't kosher. People died for this. Like, it hit me really, I'm sorry. It hit me really hard that this was not going to be something that I could say or do or express or publicly decide. And it took 2 years for me to get to that point. And it took 2 years of secret online communities for me to get the emotional wherewithal to steal money from my father so that when he kicked me out, I would have money, for me to tell everyone in my family, for me to know that I was going to lose my family, for me to essentially burn the life that I had known to the ground, because I knew living it was probably going to put me into the ground far sooner than if I had just made this decision. Sorry. Anyway, a lot of rambling.
Yeah, it's a super hard, like, definitely, and still you made it, so you're here, you are who you are, and I'm sure that, fuck them all, kind of like that. So, and the moment you thought about your father, that he didn't accept you, I feel like, for me, it's like, if I were going through such moment, it would be the hardest part of my life, I would say, to lose somebody who were with you from the beginning.
Yeah.
And what conversation did you have back then?
I remember that moment very, very vividly. I don't know. I think I hurt my father far more than he hurt me, because I was his singular pride and joy. So my father has a condition. He's had it since birth, called neurofibromatosis, which is the type that he has is mostly harmless, but basically he develops nodules all over his body, just bumps all over his body along his nervous system. And basically, the body feels like it needs to protect the nerve more. So it starts to build skin tags, and those skin tags turn into bumps, and then those bumps are riddled all over his body. So he's had this condition, and it could at any point in time go from being an innocuous type 1 of neurofibromatosis to a less innocuous type 2, where it's those nodules are building in his organs, right? So he's always felt like this fleeting notion of death. And it's also come from this notion of he does not receive the best treatment from the public because he does not look like a typical individual should. And he grew up with this from the 50s all the way through to now, right? Like he's 80 years old now. And he also had some other things happen in his personal life that resulted in him having a very, very tough life, very, very tough. And I was the one thing that he was proud of. So when I told him, there was one time when he discovered me cross-dressed right when I was getting ready to come out. It was maybe 3 weeks shy. And I guess I got a little bit bold, honestly. Like I definitely got a little bit bold. And as a result, I think I messed up hiding it from him. And he walked in on me cross-dressed, and I'm like, oh no, I'm going to a party. This is expected. It's fine. The party is like a joke kind of party thing. And I tried to play it off, and he just laughed about it. He thought it was an extraneous joke. And that made me feel horrible. But I also saw what happened on his face. Like he was very pained by it. I hurt him.
Yeah.
And it only took about 2 weeks later where I'm just like, I was going down the stairs and I had been thinking about this for weeks. I'd been so obsessed with it. And I'm like, I need to do this. I need to rip the Band-Aid off. So I'm halfway down on the stairs. My kitchen is right next to it. And he's got like this massive stove and he's cooking dinner. And I get halfway down and I'm like, Dad, we need to talk. And I'm on the stairs, right? I don't move. And I'm just like, do you remember what happened a few weeks ago? Listen, that's staying. I'm not going to hide this from you anymore. I am cross-dressing. I've been doing it for years. And I have every intention of transitioning from male to female. And there's nothing you can do about it. And I had gotten like this bitch face thing kind of in my head now. I'm like very fierce on my identity. And I remember his response. He said nothing. He just dropped the spatula, walked over, grabbed his coat, put it on him. And just with this look of disappointment, he said, I'm going to the bar. And I didn't see him for 3 days. It hurt so hard. And about a month later, my father said, like, I'm in college now. I need to be out of the house. And he expects that he will not see me as a female ever. So if I'm in the house for the rest of the time that he's present, I better be male and I better be out of the house as soon as possible. So I wasn't going to do that. So I couch surfed for several months trying to figure things out. And my father and I have never been the same since. I will say positively, over the course of the past several years, things have returned. Like I burned that bridge and it's been a decade, but he's at the end of his life now. And we kind of have a promise now where before any major event in our lives, I call him. And we also have a kosher discussion once per year, every February. So I call maybe lasts like 20 minutes. His first question is always, how much money are you making? That's just how it works now. But like, we're kosher now. And the rest of my father's side of the family is perfectly supportive of my transition, which is really good. So I did lose my family and I lost it for a decade. And I know that I will soon really lose my father, but I'm happy with where we are. Like, we're not in any way, shape, or form a familial unit, but we are at least kosher with one another. And that is a billion times better. It makes my heart so, so very warm to know that after a decade, this curmudgeon of a man has come to accept that I am female.
if it was a movie, we could talk about a happy end, but it's life. Can you call it happy end?
Uh, I also feel like the definition of happy matters there, you know? I would definitely say if this were a Hallmark film, there would be a lot more hugs involved, and those hugs do not exist in reality. But I feel like my father and I are at a kind of casual peace. And I would consider that a happy ending. If I get the call, I know I'll get the call. Like, I know it's going to happen. But if I do get that call, the first thing in my head is not going to be, what are the things I never said to him? Like understanding that satisfaction and understanding that he'll pass. Knowing that things, as far as I'm concerned, are fine. I would call that a happy ending.
Yeah. You're getting me emotional too, yeah, So
Yeah.
tell me about your mother.
My mother is the complete and total opposite. Okay, so I've told you the bad sides of the story. This is my favorite story to tell. 100%, my favorite one. So you remember my father and the infamous spatula dropping moment. I told my father, and that was on a Thursday night. And I knew when that happened that the Band-Aid was off, the diplomacy dike had cracked, the dam was going, right? I had to do this. And the next step was telling my mom. And my mom lived about 2 blocks away from me. It was a Saturday morning, and I didn't even phone her up first. I walked over, and she was in her drawers. It was Saturday morning. She's watching Doctor Who on the BBC, right? And she's just sitting there eating breakfast. And I'm like, Mom, I have something to tell you. So I sit down and she mutes the TV. She's one of those people who like, TV is never off. So she mutes it. And then she's just like, what's wrong? What's going on? And I'm like, I'm going to tell you something. Dad did not respond well to it. So I'm really hoping that this goes well. But regardless, I want you to know that I love you. And she's like, okay, this is getting really serious. And the room starts to quiet. And I'm over here going, I have, for the past several years, been cross-dressing. And then she looks at me and she's like, okay. And I'm like, and I would like to do this publicly for the foreseeable future. And she looks at me and she's like, okay. And I'm like, I am going to go to therapy to see if this might need to be more than that. I may want to take hormones. She's like, okay. I'm like, and in addition to the hormones, I would like to be referred now as your daughter because I'm going to transition. And she's like, ah. And before I give you the full reaction, a little bit about my mother. My mother has had 6 children and has been married 5 times. And she grew up in Wisconsin and Chicago and Colorado and Kansas and Wyoming. She traveled a lot. She's had a lot of partners. She's had a lot of kids. And she's never felt particularly comfortable or settled down or anything like that. And every single husband she has had has constantly nagged her and eventually did divorce her because they could have sworn up and down that she was cheating on them. She was cheating on them. And my mother is just like, I don't know why none of these men ever actually thought to consider the female best friend I keep bringing around. And I felt so guilty in every relationship because she's a super closeted, decades-long lesbian. And I'm like, Mother, what? So back to the response. I look at her and I'm like, I want to transition. She's like, that makes what I have to tell you a little bit easier. And I'm over, mother, what? And it's at that point where she's just like, so Joe's my last husband. I'm 56 years old. I'm done with this. I'm coming out because I have a girlfriend now. Her name is Pam. She's wonderful. Let's go have lunch with her. We can tell her all about you finding your own queer awakening. So it went really fantastic. It went really, really well. So I then tell my siblings. My siblings are like, we knew. And I'm like, how did you know? I have a very, very out and very gay brother. I have a very, very out and very gay sibling. They're gender queer. And I have a bi sister. It's in one day before our transition, we all had to tell our aunt. My aunt is a very Christian, very typical kind of woman. In one day, she learned that I was trans. She responded badly. My mother defended me, and in the course of defending me, came out. So now my aunt finds out her sister is gay. And then after all this, Cody, my gay brother, is just like, I don't see the problem. You've known I've been gay for like years. And she's like, I've been living with Jamie the whole time. And my sibling is just like, oh no, I've been super gay the whole time I've been living with you. And it just broke my aunt's brain. We went from, in a single day, being like this typical family to covering all of the LGBTQ space. And my aunt is just like, what else is going to happen? The phone rings and it's my oldest brother calling and just being like, hey, my wife is pregnant. And she's all in one day. We almost gave her a heart attack. It was one of the funnest, most rewarding experiences, just watching her have to change it.
How is she doing now?
Great question. She does have a pacemaker. She's doing great, actually. She just had a brief surgery on her heart again, and now she's back to walking. She's power walking on the regular now, and she's doing great. Our family's doing great. She's very accepting of this time.
Tell me, why do you aspire to be a Kiwi?
Say that again?
Why do you aspire to be a Kiwi?
A Kiwi? Yeah. So this is a very, very different thing. But when I was in school, I had this fascination and this love of community that came out of the trans community in my YouTube channel. And I started a nonprofit organization, which was all about providing online closet-friendly resources and support groups to LGBTQ individuals called rescue.net. And when the community got large enough, it occurred to me that as a CEO and as a business owner, I knew nothing. I had no idea what I was doing. And I'm like, I don't know how to build this thing, but I couldn't do traditional marketing because I didn't want to out all of these LGBTQ individuals. So I went to my school and I'm like, hey, I want to come back to school. I want to learn how to foster these communities better. I want to learn how to build this community the right way. What can I do? And the school that I came to is just like, we don't know this community management. We have no idea what you're talking about. Try marketing, business, anthropology, communication, journalism, sociology. We don't know. And I'm like, okay, fine. So I guess I'll just take them all. And that's what I did. We had this absolutely incredible advisor. Her name was Ella Bowers. She's responsible for my career. She worked with me to take all of these disparate courses. But there was only so far that I could go because the professors and the teachers didn't know about this community management thing. So I started looking for academic white papers that were assessing for community. And I came across this amazing woman. She actually just published a new white paper. Her name is Erica Pearson, and she's in New Zealand. And I read all of her stuff, like voraciously. I discovered her and she had like 12 full articles. I'm like, yes, let's do this. Some of her articles were on how to teach and educate children using virtual interfaces in the classroom, how to build collaborative documents for education with students. So they would actually build worksheets for learning math collaboratively, which was really cool. All of this community stuff that we know and love today. She was doing these studies for it. And I'm like, I need to learn under this person. So I worked really, really hard to do my first study abroad, which was with the journalism team, going through New Zealand and Australia. And I feel so bad that I missed, just by a single year and a half, I missed Vanessa Peach's community management course in Australia, in Sydney. And I really wish I had seen that, but all right, it's fine. So we go through, I meet all of these incredible people in Australia, and culturally, because of the way that Australia and New Zealand came online, online communities were much easier for them because they had less powerful networks, but they had more close net intranetworks, which made community a lot easier. So like here in the United States, we had AIM and AOL and instant messaging. There, they had GPS management and traditional BBS style forums. Like community grew for them less as a technology and more as a cultural epicenter. So there, white papers coming out about online integration were far and away more populous. So I went back for a second study, and I went to Erica Pearson and I'm like, listen, I want to take classes from you. And she's like, I don't actually have any classes, but I'm more than willing to mentor you personally. Here are the classes at Massey Uni that are most viable for you. And I'm like, okay, awesome, great. Public relations in a transcultural world. I heard public relations in a transcultural world and I'm like, bam, yes. Took it immediately. And that's what resulted in me being in New Zealand. It really does feel like a second home because that's where I learned my love of community, of social science. My understanding of the way that online communities are built was forged in New Zealand. And I have every expectation that I will be going back. I want to go back and I want to take Vanessa Peach's courses. I want to work with Sydney University if possible. And ultimately, I would like to see my homestay family again in New Zealand. And with every hope, I will eventually be allowed to call myself an Aussie or a Kiwi wherever I decide to settle down.
When do you plan to do that?
Great question. I was originally planning to do that before I launched my solo career. COVID happened. And now, probably within the next 5 years. My goal is by 2027, I will be in Australia, at least studying, maybe working.
Got it. Tell me, why do you like speed?
I didn't for a while. I really didn't. I worked as a marketer back in 2017, 2018, and I came across this client that runs a motorcycle school. And he was very dissatisfied with the national curriculum. The Motorcycle Safety Foundation is one of the few and only curriculums that teach motorcycle training. And he was very dissatisfied with it. He's like, this doesn't go hard enough. It's not saving enough lives. We need more rigor. In Europe, there's a 3 licensure tier system, which makes so much sense. But here in America, genuinely, you could put a 7-year-old on a dirt bike, and that counts as motorcycle safety training. So the second you qualify for a basic vehicular license, you can take your motorcycle endorsement. And the motorcycle endorsement is about 15 minutes in a parking lot, and they give you the endorsement. So he's like, this isn't rigorous enough. So he came to me with this entire curriculum that he wanted to build. And this was like the first time I had ever actually built like a training curriculum. And he's like, I want a workbook, a field guide, a set of video lessons, and I want this to be available in an online context eventually. And I'm like, that's huge. I don't know how to ride a bike, much less write this. So we're going to need some help. So I brought in a copywriter. He's one of my best friends, Dylan. And in addition to that, I'm like, I need to actually experience the product. So put me on a motorcycle, put me in one of these training classes. Second I'm on that motorcycle, I'm like, oh no, this is a thing. Oh, this is a thing. I am hooked. And I wasn't a speed demon. I was like an absolute angel in a car. My entire career, up until I found myself on a motorcycle, and I'm like, cars are ruined for me now. These bikes are incredible and I love them. And now I'm very, very proud to call myself an adventure rider. I just did the Colorado backcountry discovery route, which is like this super, super difficult dirt trail that's like kept through Colorado for like the most beautiful scenery. I call myself an adventure rider. I call myself a pretty expert rider. I'm in my fourth season and I'm already doing a BDR. And when it comes to the pavement, when it comes to the dirt roads, leaning that bike over, the faster you go, the easier it is to lean. That's where it is.
Tell me a story about your first meeting with Fawn.
My first meeting with
Fawn, your motorcycle.
Oh, Fawn. Yeah. So my bike's name is Fawn, named after the baby deer that saved my life. That's a special story. But when I first bought Fawn, I had actually been looking specifically for a KTM Duke 390 for a year and a half. And I had been saving up to move to Australia for a while. So I'm sitting here, I'm just sitting on a mountain of cash, and COVID happens. And I'm like, I'm not going to be able to move to Australia until this is done. And it's a global pandemic. It's going to be a while. What am I going to do? And I'm sitting on this mountain of cash going like, well, why don't I just do the one thing I've been preventing myself from doing because I want to move? So I took that cash and I went and I bought a motorcycle. And in the very beginning of COVID, everyone's like, no one wants to pay for anything adventurous or anything that gets them out of the house. So the motorcycle industry tanked. And this bike that was MSRP about $6,600, I found it for $4,800. And I'm like, okay, I'm doing that. So I go and I buy the bike, and it turns out it's $4,800 plus everything else. I bought the bike MSRP for $3,600. It was just kismet. It was, I laid down cash that hour. It only took me an hour. I went, I checked it, I sat on her, and then I was told it was a 10% discount on top of a 10% manufacturing discount. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm buying her. So I get her. I love her. Just immediately. She is my daughter immediately. This, like, you know how people immediately get attached to pets in a pound or something like that? Like they go to a rescue and they're immediately attached to this pet. That happened on this bike. And about 6, maybe 7 months later, I'm considering myself a beginner rider because this is my first motorcycle. I'm driving home from Breckenridge at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I'm wary, I'm concerned because I know that wildlife is going to be a thing. And I see the first deer and I'm like, oh no, remember your training, swerve the opposite direction of the momentum, you'll be fine. So I do, I swerve and I get around the deer and I'm like, oh geez. And then I see deer number 2. I'm like, remember the second part of your training. So I stand myself up and I brace and I prepare myself and I accelerate and I'm like, just straighten up and take it. So I straighten up and I prepare, I close my eyes and nothing happens. I'm like, what? And I see deer number 2 go through and I'm like, oh, and I see deer number 3 and it hits, nothing I can do about it. It hits the front of my tire and I'm like, well, I'm going down. There's nothing I can do about it, but I was safe. I'm wearing gear. I'm not going past the speed limit. Everything is fine. And I know I'm going to be going down, but I don't. When I open my eyes, I come out of the accident going 25 miles an hour, perfectly upright. I'm like, what? I should have at least been replacing gear. And I go to brake with my front brake and it's not working. I'm like, what? Okay. So I brake with my back brake and it takes me about a mile and a half, maybe like kilometer, like 2 kilometers. Slow down, stop on the side of the road. And I'm like, what happened? And I look at my bike and my fairings are broken. So something definitely came across the front of my bike. My front brake caliper is pretty messy. And then I actually have like pieces of deer on the right front side of my bike. And I'm like, there's no way, what happened? But I look back and my license plate is completely up and also has some deer on it. And I'm like, no, the deer definitely went around me. What happened? Took 2 hours in the sun coming up for me to discover that deer number 3 was accompanied by a younger fawn number 4. And what had happened with the bike was the deer number 3 had hit the front, which I should have been flipping like this for. But a fawn tried to jump over my bike, got caught on my license plate. And what had happened was my bike just and then came out. That fawn saved my life. So that's why my bike's name is Fawn and why I'm so attached to her. And she's now 4 years old. And I don't think I want to get rid of her. I know that she's a base level bike. She's definitely a beginner bike, but I adore her far too much to let her go, I think.
Yeah, such a great story. And what was the best adventure you had together so far?
Oh, yeah. That's hard. There's obviously the Colorado BDR. I'm so proud of her for that. She's meant to be a road bike, but I've modified her heavily for off-road use. And last summer, I would say, I went to Sturgis in South Dakota. Everyone knows Sturgis to be a bike town because of Harley Davidson's taking on it all the time. But I was actually there a few weeks prior to that for an adventure ride version of Sturgis. And we were in the middle of nowhere. And unfortunately, we did get a rider hurting themselves. So we had to get this rider out of the wilderness. And I had to help do that. So on Fawn, I wasn't really able to take the road often travel, the one that was verified. We had to get out and we had to take the shortest option. And the shortest option was way beyond my personal skill level. Way beyond. I had to push myself pretty hard. And I was really worried we were going to have 2 riders to get out. But Fawn did so fantastically and so well getting that rider out. And we were able to get to the hospital. And I did a quick once over on Fawn. She was immaculate, just covered in dirt. You could tell it was very adventurous. I have her on my Facebook. You can see her just covered in mud. And I really, really love that I did that on her because it made me feel like we both grew. We were both out of our comfort zones. She was not meant for that amount of effort. And like she as a bike was able to do it. So I'm so much more confident of with her, taking her to like float rocks through a river. I feel perfectly fine doing that on her now, that kind of thing.
Also, it sounds to me like you with her took sometimes much harder challenges, you know, and like than you were prepared for and just went through them. So in your life, what more challenges did you have that you took on before being prepared for that?
Everything. I should not be running a business. Like, in my career, like with socially constructed.online, I love that my mission of bringing social science into community struck a chord. I love being able to speak on social science and teach the social science of community. But when it comes to running a business, like every success metric that I have measured for my business has been through the roof. Did not expect it to be as successful as it was, except for one, and that's monetary. Like I am the poorest I've ever been. I am the most in debt I've ever been. No consistent contracts or clients coming in. I don't know that aspect of business, and I'm discovering that I'm very, very bad at it. I wasn't prepared going into this, and it's been 18 months now of me building this company. No regrets. I have 0 regrets. But what I do have are a lot of learning potential, because like I firmly believe that in order for you to learn from a failure objectively, you have to call it a failure. And that comes from motorcycling. We have this thing called an after action review. Okay, you crashed. Why? Leading up to it, how did you respond? Were you wearing gear? What happened after the fact? How could you have been more cognizant going into it to avoid something like that. And there are many crashes that you just simply cannot avoid. But even from those crashes, you can learn from something. How did you deal with it in the aftermath? And I applied the same philosophy of an after action review for my failures to business. And when it comes to socially constructed, I recognize that I have failed to bring in money for this company. I have failed to bring in clients, and I have failed to keep myself afloat financially. What can I learn from that? And I've spent a lot of time thinking about that and doing that. And one of the main things is that I'm just not prepared to do the business side of business, right? So where do I go from that, you know? There have also been some aspects in community management where I'm like, I've tried to do community as a done for you service. That does not work. I've tried to do community with proposals and with a traditional approach as most business owners expect to work with consultants. That's not working. I was talking with Deb Shell, absolutely incredible community consultants collective, highly recommend it. And she was giving me a whole bunch of things where she's just like, no, you need to raise your prices. And 2, why are you modifying your proposals 6 times? You deliver a proposal, maybe a single edit, but after that, it's just take it or leave it. Do they pay you or not? I'm like, yeah, you're right. I need to do that. So it's been living and learning and accepting your mistakes so that you can do an after action review and figure out what becomes better. So
Why do you think you're always changing your proposals?
I pride myself on setting lines in the sand in my personal life, and I have not brought that into my professional life. So I think in a lot of ways, people get a lot more free stuff out of me than they should, because I'm more than willing to bend over backwards. And I'm not sure if you've noticed this, I generally cannot prevent myself from offering information because I just love to teach and I love to talk. And that gets me into trouble because people are just like, well, we haven't yet brought you on, but if you were to do this, how would you do this? And then I'm like, well, here's the whole strategy, right? I need to learn to set lines in the sand and say, if I'm going to answer your question, you need to pay me first.
Yeah.
Because I don't do it, you know?
Yeah. And I totally hear you, you know, some time ago, I have the Sales Hero community in Ukraine for sales experts, and I decided to create kind of like knowledge base and to create paid access. So like $10 a month or something like that. So people can like have this access to all this valuable information. And I gave it up, you know, like I was like, I'm still giving this information for free. Why? Yeah. So I just opened everything we had in the community. I just opened every webinar we did, like all the content, and it was like in one day. And I was like, if you want to pay, you pay. I will use this money to, you know, send to our army and to support our country. And if not, go learn, you know. So
Yeah.
I totally hear you on this side. So
Yeah.
from this perspective, I'm also not that great.
Yeah. One thing I have stumbled across, though, across these failures is I think I've discovered a model for co-creative and co-iterative courses that I'm hoping will pay, but still offer free access to content. And I'm piloting it soon. I'm super excited. I can't announce it yet because it's still with the university right now. But the model that we kind of rough drafted with Scott Wilder in the CLG campus for my free analytics course, we get paid exorbitantly, like a larger amount than we should, to actually do live cohort courses and train the trainers and stuff like that by building those curriculums with those trainers. And they get paid not just to do the training, but to form the coursework, a larger amount via sponsorship. And then sponsors get access to those courses for free with a discount on cohort courses. And if you do that with the exorbitant amount on the front end, it allows you to say, cool, great. Now the recorded version of this course, we're just going to give it to you for free. And we're only going to give it to you for free if it's going to contribute to the greater health of virtual worlds.
Yeah.
So as an example, the analytics course is about how to keep your community sustainable without sacrificing the real value that you think comes out of that community. So how do you distill the community ROI from an actual anthropological concept into business owners' concept of ROI without sacrificing the real value and meaning and voice of your community? And we have this other one. I can't talk about the details again, but we're going to be discussing the interfacing and reestablishment of journalism as an industry within community management. So how can community managers interface with journalists in a way that improves the information diet of our communities while removing the burden of information gathering from our community managers? And on the flip side, how can journalists flip the script from being an institution for information that people do or do not trust into a rooted community report out that says, in this community, this happened, here's how people feel about it and why. So the hope is, at least in the United States, but I know it's happening all over the world because Edelman's Trust Barometer is a thing. The hope is that we can bring journalism back as an institution, and we can do it by interfacing journalism with the communities that have a need for this journalistic integrity.
When you were talking about that, I just had a thought that sometimes I feel that community builders are, empathetical journalists. Because that's exactly what we're doing. We just talk to people and then we share the stories with others and encourage them to share their stories with others. So I'll be waiting for that. And do you learn your lessons right away, or do you need to repeat some mistakes several times?
That's a hard question to answer. I am just like everyone else. I will make a mistake multiple times before I learn from it. And I think that's just the case for all humans. Like, it's very, very difficult to learn a lesson, but it's doubly difficult to recall that lesson when times get hard. And I think that's why a lot of people will learn from a mistake, make an entire YouTube video about it. I'm calling me out. Make an entire YouTube video going, here's how it should work. And then go try it and do that same mistake again. And I'm bringing up I bring this up because it happened very recently with the Community Managers Unconference. I was working with James Cattell and Jill Nicholson to give the hybrid community event system a go. And we had a lot of experiments there. And just prior to signing up to volunteer for that project, I had put together an entire video series on my YouTube channel. I think there's 9 of us contributing to the series on how to make hybrid and virtual events better. And I made an entire video about it. I got advice from Jen Junon, from Carmen at Community Coach Carmen, from Niyama Shang, all of these amazing people who have done this and criticized it and learned their lessons and gotten experience, put the YouTube video together. And I'm like, I want to walk my talk. Let's give this a go. I go, we do the Community On Conference. James, Jill, and I just met, and we're just like, we did not succeed. We failed hardcore. So the number one task that we put for ourselves for September's event, for this upcoming event, our number one task was to go to that playlist and rewatch it. And we had all 3 of us. So James grabbed the first 3. I have the second 3. Jill has the third 3. We are relearning our lessons, because once you get into the thick of it, it's not enough to know what you know. You have to be able to recall it. And harkening back to motorcycle stuff, when you're in an emergency, your body and your brain automatically revert to the lowest level of training you have.
Yeah.
So if your training that you've had is not deeply ingrained, if it's not at that lowest level, you're not going to go to it. And the same thing happens when you're in a personal circumstance. You might have these knowledges of like, exclusivity breeds inclusivity. Small groups are the unit of change. All these phrases that I have, get good, then get better. Being able to bring those up in a situation is remarkably difficult. So you have to make mistakes that you've already made. And it's not enough to learn from your mistakes. You have to practice implementing them.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree that sometimes it's good to repeat mistakes, you know, that's how you learn better. So
yeah. But yeah, we're giving it another go. This September's event, the Eventbrite is on, and its theme, happily enough, is hybrid events, which is nice. We'll figure it out. We're gonna figure this out, and we're gonna do it collectively because it's the only way
choice, you know. So like, yeah. So what do people usually say when discover that you are tone deaf?
Oh, you found that. Okay, fun. A lot of people deeply misunderstand it. So the easiest way to explain it is, a lot of people think of tone deaf as I'll never hit a tone, but the reality is I hear tones in groups. So the musicians listening, if you think about a music bar, it's not that some lines on that music bar are missing. That doesn't happen. You squish it. So if you have a tone on a music bar and then you go a certain number up, I'm not going to hear it change. I don't hear it change. It's that change that matters. But if you play those two tones separately, like I can hear them, but I won't understand the difference between them. So A's just sound like A's. And truth be told, I don't even know what that means. But like, it's just about the differences in tones. And what a lot of people will do immediately when they hear that I'm tone deaf is they'll just be like, oh, so like, let me play you the song and let me see what you can hear out of it. And I'm like, that's not how that works, because if I've heard the song, my experience of the song is still the same. Like, I will have heard the song just fine. In the absence of the knowledge of congenital amusia, I just didn't have any emotional connection to music because I didn't understand the emotions that arise from the changes in those tones. And I know logically that they are there. If you show me a bar of music, I can see it, but I can't hear those differences occur.
So usually, from my experience, people like love two things, like music and food. So what do you replace music with?
Visual art. And I think that's one of the main reasons why I love musicals so much. And a lot of people get like really surprised. They're like, you're tone deaf. Why are you wasting your time in musicals? I'm like, because when people dance and when the choreography and the lighting and the colors and the visual effects reflect the music, it's like having a translator. It's like having someone doing ASL on the side. It transcribes for me what emotions I need to be feeling. And I can also say anime and illustration and the animated art form has been unduly helpful for me in understanding what music means to other people. Because if you give me a song like Beethoven's Fifth or whatever, people can cry due to that. I'm like, whatever. But if you put that same Beethoven's Fifth to, like, what's a good example? Final Waltz. It's an anime called Gundam Wing, Final Waltz, 2003. It wasn't meant to be super emotional, but I remember at the very climax of that film, sorry, spoilers, they send the Gundams, these like machinated robots, into the sun, and they play a sonata during that time. And the way that that scene is animated is explicitly meant to go along with that music. The music came first. So the animators spent an immense amount of time making very clear how you're supposed to feel so that it would enhance the music. And in so doing, the composition, the color, the orientation, the animation, the speed, the rate, all of these visual elements translated for me what that sonata feels like for everyone else. And I cried just the same as anyone else would hearing the music. And the same thing happens with Your Lie in April. Incredible anime, highly recommend it. The way that they use music, it's about a pianist as a child who goes through childhood trauma of losing a friend due to cancer. And every single song he gives is animated, and they break the realism. They have sunflowers showing up in the screen. They have like these really, really dark tones when it gets dark. It translated for me what music feels like, and I cry every time.
You know, Venia, I really wish to have the sky as the limit to our conversation, but time is the limit. So let's jump to the rapid fire questions.
Sure.
Right hand or left hand drive?
Left.
Anime or board games?
Oh, that is so mean. Board games.
What are your favorite color and musical or anime?
So my favorite color is royal blue. My favorite musical is Repo the Genetic Opera. And my favorite anime, at the moment at least, and this is a rapid fire question too. Oh no. My favorite, I have to say Ruby, RWBY, definitely.
Got it. If you were a superhero, what superpower would you have?
I would have the ability to manage and transfer emotions. And I have a very specific approach for this. I would have the ability to make people feel tired or hungry or feel greed or maybe satiate lust, for instance. But in exchange, I lose it. So it works like a battery. So if I make someone feel angry, I feel calm. If I make someone feel sleepy, I can't sleep at night. And that creates like this really natural thing that allows me to empathically help people mediate.
Yeah, sounds amazing. Who do you learn from in the community world? Just one person.
Just one person? Oh,
it's a rapid fire questions, you know.
The person I have been learning the most from recently, I would say is Pat Cooney, for sure.
Name two people who I should definitely have this conversation with.
Jen Junod, for sure. Highly recommend Jen. She's doing some absolutely incredible work. And Mary Blessing Akoli. She did a keynote for the Community Managers On Conference. She was our burgeoning speaker for that year. And the things that she's doing for She Code Africa are just phenomenal.
Got it. Is there one question that I definitely should have asked you but didn't?
Oh, no. I think we had an absolutely incredible conversation, and I know that a lot of it was me, but I had an immensely wonderful time. And I just think what you're doing is so grapevine communication based that it really allows for a lot more bonding. And I think that keep it organic like this. I love this.
Yeah, thank you very much for your kind words. And what is the best way for people to connect with you?
Absolutely. So for as long as it exists, Samantha Venia is my tag on Twitter, but ultimately it's the best idea to subscribe to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/@sociallyconstructedonline. And from that YouTube channel, you'll get access to my Discord channel, my courses, my Patreon, where we're co-iteratively learning to build this community thing using social science.
Yeah, Venia, thank you very much for such a great conversation. You know, like I was like thinking what to talk about because you have so many different sides of personality, at least from social media. And I was a little nervous, but the moment we started this conversation, I don't know why, but it was like so easy. So conversation was just going, and you made me emotional at one point. And yeah, thank you so much for being such an open and such a great person to talk to.
Absolutely. Totally happy to do it. And also happy Pride for anyone who's listening and gets impacted by that story as well. And I'm an open book. I'm happy to help. Just send me a message and let me know. And also, don't forget to take care of yourself. That's very, very important. Yeah.
Agree. And yeah, see you in the community world.
You too. Thank you so much, Yuri.
And thank you so much for listening. If you'd like the show, hit the like button of 5 stars and share it with your friend. That's it. We're done. See you in the next episode.